And welcome to the Industry 4 Community Podcast, the earliest one we have ever done. I am your host with the most, Walker D. Reynolds. This one's gonna be shitty. Okay, let me just put it out there. Let me start. We're gonna talk about TPG's acquisition of Kepware and ThingWorx on the heels of their acquisition of Prophecy from GE. I spent the weekend actually. I knew this deal was coming. I knew it was one of two ways that this was going to go, Kepware and ThingWorx. This was the option I was least hoping for. But I want to be careful here. All right. So I wrote my opening statements. Okay. And the reason why is because I want to make sure that I say my opening exactly the way I want to say it. So I wrote it. Also, on this topic, I am well over 1,000 direct messages on this specific topic, which is incredibly rare. I don't normally get 1,000 DMs on a single topic. I have received dozens of messages from OEMs begging me not to do this, okay, not to publish this and say anything. They're terrified, not of me. They're terrified of this deal. And the people are freaking the fuck out. All right. Now, should people be freaking out? Of course not. There's upsides here. Like I have a call to action at the end. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with what just happened. Like, what does this actually mean for the industry? Okay. What is the mechanics of what happened? I'm going to talk about some of the background with PTC and Kepware and ThingWorx. I'm going to talk about who TPG is a little bit. And then I'm going to basically go through 4 cross sections and say, what does this mean if you're an OEM? What does this mean if you're an end user? And what should you do? Okay. And then I'm also going to talk about what some of the potential downsides of this could be, the likely downsides. What should you expect as it relates to Kepware and ThingWorx and Prophecy and over the next, year, and then 24 months, and then 5 years. And then, some recommendations on what you should do if you're a Kepware user, et cetera, et cetera. Let me start, though, before I do my opening. I had 2 calls this morning with vendors who are going to be impacted by this. And both of them, I talked to their CEOs, and which I normally do not do before a video, but I did speak to 2 of the people who had voiced concerns about if we, will I say something that's going to hurt their business immediately and cause a mass exodus by manufacturers and all that kind of stuff. And, both of them are like, listen, this could decimate my business. And I said, and I read these opening statements to them so that they knew what I was going to say. And then I said to them, if my stated goal is to educate the market across the market, so OEMs, end users, manufacturers, and integrators, give them the information they need from my perspective, so that they can invest wisely and strategically position themselves to become data companies with open infrastructure, so that they can make data the primary commodity, the playbook that Tesla and Amazon and Volkswagen North America and the other most digitally advanced companies in the world that we're never allowed to mention their names. If that's the goal, then how can I communicate to them what I have a duty to communicate to them, and at the same time frame it in a way where you're most comfortable? Okay. And we basically agreed that I would soften some of the OEM language. Okay. So I'm just being fully transparent. Okay. Because I don't want to hurt anybody. You know what I mean? I'm a little bit of pain is for growth is good. You know, like, hey, if you go to the gym and you work out to make yourself throw up or whatever, if what you get in exchange is a healthier, stronger body, then it's worth it. But hurting people who are going to kicking somebody if they're going to die is wrong. Okay. All right. So number 2, you may have noticed that this week or last week, end of last week, Litmus launched a big initiative to go, basically promoting going after Kepware customers. I've gotten a lot of comments about that. How do you feel about this? Do you agree with what they're doing? Yeah, I think it's a little unbecoming. I don't think the optics are very good. Okay. I think the intention is very good, but I don't think the optics are. I think, I've had a lot of conversations with folks at Litmus internally, half dozen people there, and even some people at Litmus are uncomfortable with Litmus aggressively going after Kepware customers. But when you talk to people at Litmus, the general consensus is PTC through Kepware, okay, it's not Kepware's fault, it's PTC's fault, has let down and broken promises for Kepware customers, okay? Whether those promises are directly stated or indirectly stated, Kepware customers are let down, okay? That's, and this is an opportunity for the folks at Litmus to deliver on those promises. That is their perspective, okay? So while I'm uncomfortable with the approach, I don't think it looks good. Okay. The intention is really good, and the outcome for customers, I think, will be really good. Okay. Let me start before I get into the podcast. I don't have the chat up. I will, once I'm done reading the opening, I will open the chat and see any comments. I don't know who will be on here at 9 a.m. Maybe nobody's on here. Maybe I'm talking to myself, but I will open the chat once I'm done reading the opening here. Okay. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this deal after I give mine. All right. All right. So here we go. So what just happened? TPG, which is Texas Pacific Group. They're based in Fort Worth. I live in Dallas, Fort Worth, based in Fort Worth. They're buying Kepware and ThingWorx from PTC in a deal that's worth about $600 million. I'm going to get into the numbers here later. That's appalling. I mean, it's appalling. But it's a deal worth $600 million in cash plus up to another $125 million in contingent payments. And that's going to close in the first half of next year. Okay, so sometime by June 2026, the deal is going to close. It's not a one-off transaction. It's on the heels of TPG buying Prophecy Software Business for about $600 million. Okay, they put the two together and you can see their strategy. Prophecy is manufacturing software with visualization and MES capabilities, a pure monolith. This is a holdover from Imelt's days. Everyone agrees that Prophecy is a failed platform. I don't think anyone's going to argue that Prophecy is not a failed platform. And it's because there was a divergent approach in the early 2010s. Some organizations like Rockwell, GE, they went the monolithic approach. They wanted to go to market with OT software for OT IT convergence the same way they go to market with IT software. They basically were looking for the Microsoft Azure playbook. Okay, they were looking for the Microsoft playbook, Microsoft Office playbook, but for industrial software, right? And it failed miserably. Okay. And it's a core reason why GE Digital failed. TPG bought Prophecy in September, and it will also close about the same time this deal closes. Kepware is industrial connectivity, the on-ramp coming out of PLCs. It's actually not just PLCs. It's essentially all of the devices that contain all the most important events in a business that oftentimes speak proprietary protocols. Kepware is the gateway into that intelligence. Okay, it is, make no mistake about it. Kepserver EX is the gold standard in industrial connectivity, even to this day. Has Litmus gotten very, very close to them? Yes, but Litmus isn't looking at being just connectivity. So if you need just connectivity, right, and you look at Litmus Edge, you're going to get a lot more than just connectivity with Litmus Edge. Okay, so it isn't, while there is an apples to apples comparison there, or with Matricon OPC, and there are many others, Cogent Data Hub. Kepware's the gold fucking standard, even to this day, even in spite of the fact that PTC has invested essentially no dollars in development since 2016. It's still the gold standard, except everyone's caught up and the technical debt in Kepserver has piled up. Okay, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then ThingWorx, the third piece of this acquisition, this $1.2 billion acquisition total, $600 million for Prophecy, $600 million for ThingWorx and Kepware. Okay. ThingWorx is the IoT platform, and it's the optionality for industrial cloud AI stories. ThingWorx is the mirage in this acquisition. Both ThingWorx and Prophecy are anchors. Prophecy has more potential than ThingWorx does. ThingWorx is a fucking boat anchor. It's what it is. I was in Europe a couple of weeks ago. I met with one end user who was using ThingWorx. I was literally on site, a large multinational, manufacturer in the European Union. They were using a ThingWorx stack, and they've spent 5 years trying to realize value. Absolutely hate PTC's pricing model. They hate the platform doesn't do what they need it to do. They're getting ready to pivot to an Ignition stack. They're using Kepware on the edge. Okay. Sounds like they're looking at pivoting to Litmus. And then I talked to another end user who was in the exact same scenario. They both said the same things. That ThingWorx is not, and they cannot realize the value of IoT using ThingWorx. And that is a recurring theme. There are two things out of ThingWorx. Number one, ThingWorx didn't develop. Balata played a huge role in the development of ThingWorx. He gave PTC an IoT platform on a silver platter, and then they did nothing with it. And because they did nothing with it, they made one stab at manufacturing apps and Operation Optimizer, or whatever it was called. And then they just went all in on Thing Objects and the OSI Pi partnership. And ThingWorx turned into $1 million a year average cost for a dashboarding tool. Okay. They were competing against Grafana. Okay. And Telegraph Objects. So what is TPG Capital doing? They're building an industrial software stack around the data layer. Okay. Make no mistake about it. Kepware is the purchase here. Kepware is the purchase. Okay. Prophecy with Kepware is the future. These deals live in TPG Capital, which is the big US European buyout fund inside of TPG's software franchise. Okay. You can do all your own research on TPG. Okay. You can see kind of how they've evolved from, healthcare in the beginning. They were doing like leverage buyouts in the beginning. They are, let's just put it this way. There doesn't seem to be anything TPG cares about at all, not even a little, than squeezing every fucking dollar out of any asset they have at any cost. Okay. So this is when you hear private equity, and all the bad connotations about private equity, basically private investors who come together, they put money into a fund, and then the private equity firm is the one that turns that fund into return. Their playbook, the reason their playbooks are generally 3 to 5 years or 3 to 6 years is because you can fake value in that short amount of time. You can create the mirage. You can create a mirage of value for exit or IPO. That doesn't mean that they don't ever yield value. It's just the playbook is structured that way because it is much harder to yield long-term value than it is short-term. This is why you get stuck in proof of concept purgatory. Okay. It's much easier. It's much easier to yield value in a short proof of concept than it is to scale an entire business digitally. Okay. TPG's capital's job is to buy established platforms and squeeze more growth and margin out of them, and then resell or IPO once they've been transformed into bigger, more strategic assets. And I'm going to go into that in a little bit more in detail. All right. So now I'm going to read, and I'm not going to, no commentary here because I want to make sure I get this exactly the way I wanted to say it and I don't fuck up here. All right. Kepware versus ThingWorx. What's a real asset? Let's just say the quiet part out loud. Kepware is the crown jewel. It's the de facto industrial gateway in thousands of plants, tens of thousands. It's where proprietary events become open, enabling OT data to merge with IT data. And the important point here is connect, collect. So if digital transformation is connect, collect, store, analyze, visualize, find patterns, report, solve, iteratively over and over and over again, you build out digital infrastructure, okay? And then you plug into a digital supply chain. Kepware falls in the connect, collect layer, okay? Connect, collect is the stickiest layer in any organization. Sticky in business means it's hard to get away from, okay? And TPG knows that. ThingWorx is baggage with options, okay? It gives TPG a platform narrative, basically legitimacy in the IoT platform language. So they got IoT and apps and mashups. But the real non-negotiable value is the connectivity layer, Kepware. That's where the dependency and the lock-in live. All right, I'm going to hit pause. I have 3 large analyst reports that were submitted to me. I have 3 of them, okay? And the mandate for the analysts was analyze this deal, and then you give me a report on what the impact for end users, OEMs, and systems integrators are going to be, and then the market en masse. Okay, and then I will look at that and go, okay, here are the likely outcomes of this deal. All right, what I'm reading here is what I distilled those analyses into. All right. From an investor's perspective, TPG didn't just buy software. They bought control of the pipe, the data layer. That's what they got here. Okay? Make no mistake about it. This is a huge fucking acquisition. It is a seismic announcement. Okay? I've been saying all along, okay, this is how seismic it is. And this is how stupid PTC is. Okay? This is how dumb their leadership is. Make no mistake about it. In Industry 4, okay, they're not dumb in general. They had no business buying ThingWorx in Kepware, none. Okay, I blame PTC for this current situation. TPG's playbook is stabilize, monetize, and modernize. So if you look at TPG's software and enterprise group, they call it SET, the SET group. That's the group under TPG Capital that's going to have control of Kepware and ThingWorx and Prophecy. If you look at software and enterprise tech group, their playbook is very predictable. Okay. Step number 1, right now, we're in step 1, it's stabilize. So they're going to carve out the software. Okay. They're going to carve out all 3 platforms, 2 of them from PTC's business. It's going to be pretty easy for Kepware because Kepware's been running kind of autonomously for 2 years. Really, PTC hasn't been super involved. Let me hit pause real quick. Major announcements have been happening at Kepware. For example, I can say this now. When I shot the video about Kepware is dead, the reason it's dead is because the guy who left is named Sam Elsner. Okay, and Sam Elsner left for Litmus, and he had been at Kepware for 15 years. And Sam is literally the best applications engineer I've ever worked with in my entire career. It's not even close. Okay, there's another guy named Matt Swope who I worked with. Sorry, he's not a public figure either, but I'm sure Matt will be okay with it. In fact, I think he's looking for work right now, contracting wise, on LinkedIn. Matt Swope is another one, is one of the top 5 applications engineers I've ever worked with in my entire career. Sam Elsner is number 1 at the top of the list. And he was the greatest evangelist for Kepware. And when everyone else jumped ship, when everybody left, when Tony Payne left and John Harrington and Tori and Caroline and Aaron Semley, and they all left and went to Highbite, okay? Basically the core team that fucking built Kepware, and then they just kept taking more people from Kepware, and then Adam Kennedy went to Litmus, and then Sam Elsner went to Litmus. There was only one person that remained, and that was the person in charge of the product group, the one who was doing nothing with the platform since 2016, who I had 24 conversations with and begged him to go in certain directions, and he turned his fucking nose up at me. Well, guess what? He's no longer in charge of the product anymore. Okay, there is a new product owner at Kepware. There's a whole bunch of moves that have been going on because they realize, wow. And I'll guarantee that those were reactions to Sam leaving. I guarantee it. Losing Sam Elsner at Kepware is like losing Travis Cox at Inductive Automation. It's literally a fucking apples to apples comparison. No matter what, you keep Travis Cox. No matter what at Inductive Automation. Not that Travis would ever go anywhere, but that's how big of a deal that is to lose Sam Elsner. Now, I didn't use his name in the original video because I didn't get his permission, but I found out later, they didn't care. He didn't care if I used his name. All right. Step number 1, clean carve out, settle contracts, keep the lights on. So in the short term, nothing's going to change. Okay. And by the way, in these deals, nothing does change for 8 to 12 months. Okay. So I just want to allay any concerns anyone has, like, holy shit, what does this mean for me if I'm a manufacturer or whatever? In the next 8 to 12 months, it literally means absolutely nothing. It's probably going to be 6 months from now. You're going to get an announcement here in the next 60 days. And then 6 months from now, you'll probably get a formal message. Okay. And the idea is to keep everybody calm. All right. Step 2 in stabilize is calm down the partners and the end users and reassure everyone that nothing changes yet. All right. Step 2. Okay. And this is where things start changing for you. It's called monetize. So they stabilize, monetize, modernize. So they're going to standardize pricing. They'll rationalize their SKUs, the product codes. Okay. They will tighten up discounting. They'll push annual recurring revenue, and they'll push maintenance. They'll start bundling. Okay. So starting 12 months from now, we should have a general idea kind of where we're going. Okay. And you're going to start seeing Kepware bundled with this new Prophecy IoT platform. Here's the problem with these acquisitions. Okay. All 3 of these products. In fact, you know what the crazy thing is this? The product that has the least amount of technical debt, where you could actually take the platform and turn it into something that you could do: connect, collect, store, analyze, visualize, find patterns, report, and solve, and plug into a digital supply chain on an open infrastructure, the classic IIoT platform, and then enable AI. It's ThingWorx. ThingWorx is the one that would require the least amount of refactoring, because ThingWorx hasn't been built poorly. It's just been neglected. Okay. Kepware and Prophecy both have massive amounts of technical debt that have to be undone. In some cases with Kepware, there's wholesale, the code base has to be written from scratch. Like, Kepware is wholly dependent on Windows environments. Like when they were going to the container, why don't they have containerized drivers? Well, because they have to write them from scratch. They have to build a completely separate SDK. They got to use a different language. And by using a different language, they have to use different technology for communications. This is where concepts like DCOM and COM and all that kind of stuff come in. Kepware's got a lot of work that has to be done. A lot of work. But at its core, Kepware has this amazing lab. They have this amazing install base, and they know how to build drivers. They do. Now, but they'd have to build them in a completely different language. And all the growing pains that they had to go through in the early 2000s when Tony Payne was in charge and Kepware was really just like a regional platform in the Northeast when I was introduced to them, because I was in Ithaca, New York, and they were in Portland, Maine. They'd have to go through that again. And Prophecy, they bought a name. Let's not bullshit here. They bought a fucking name. That's what they bought. Okay? Because Prophecy was built as a monolith. Okay, what are they going to do? Compete with Palantir? I mean, they're going to get their asses handed to them. Palantir is a completely closed platform. But it is next level technology. Their ontology engine underneath the hood. Okay? Basically, Palantir uses a unified namespace inside their platform. Okay, and it's their ontology layer. The problem is it's closed. It's a monolithic platform. It is not designed to play well with anything that's not Palantir or Palantir partner. Okay? Prophecy was in the same fucking boat. Okay? And it's because some fucking bean counter, never once did they go, how do we prioritize the best outcomes for the customers? They're like, no, how do we make the most money off of this? By the way, there's nothing wrong with making money as long as your money is coming from value and not a mirage or not a promise you never deliver on. Fuckers. All right, step 3, modernize. So now after monetizing, you're going to modernize. And this is the part that's the least known for us. Okay, we know, we can pretty much predict what's going to happen in the stabilized, monetized stage. You're going to be paying more. Okay, you're gonna be buying, if you're a Kepware customer, you're going to be buying a lot less a la carte. You're going to be buying a lot more bundled, and you're going to have to commit to longer agreements. You're going to be paying more. Okay, modernize is what they're going to do with these 3 down the road. What is this new encapsulated platform that they are going to build in the next, starting 12 to 24 months from now, because their exit almost certainly is 3 to 5 years, 4 to 6 at the absolute most, where they're going to want to IPO or sell off the entire thing. So that's adding cloud, AI, platform gloss. That's new product names, new dashboards, new industrial data platform branding, more value, but also much more dependency concentrated inside their stack. So if you're a Kepware customer, the product isn't going away. The real risk is creeping lock-in and creeping cost over the next 3 to 5 years. Okay, it doesn't mean that Kepware still doesn't have the best fucking drivers out there. They do. And let me just say this. I'm going to hit pause again. I prayed a lot about this video. Like, I have a responsibility to shoot this. I do. Okay. These are the video, just like when I shot the video earlier this year about PTC and Kepware. By the way, everything I said in those fucking videos was 100% spot on. If you want to know why people listen to me, it's not only that I can deliver technically, it's that when I fucking tell people something, more times than not, 99% of the time, I get it right when it comes to the industry. Anyway, believe me, there's a lot of shit I get wrong. So impact on Kepware's OEM partners. And I'm just going to kind of fly over this part, but let's talk about the part that I don't think anyone's really thinking about directly. But what happens to the companies that white label Kepware? We're going to focus on Kepware. So these are, Kepware is in a lot of places other than just places where you see the Kepware logo. It's wrapped into lots of products. It's wrapped into white label solutions. Okay. What's the impact on those people? Okay. And if you're a customer of those people, well, the answer is those partners are in a leveraged position. Okay. So they have commercial and licensing risk. Like some of that's going to change, right? They have roadmap and branding uncertainty. Like fundamentally what will change under a private equity ownership is those OEM partners will have less of a say in the direction of the platform. It's going to be more of a, you're either with us or you take it our way or get the fuck out. It's more of a model similar to like, being a Rockwell channel partner. It'll be something more like that. They have to expect something like that. Channel and positioning conflicts. This is probably the biggest one where they're going to be kind of pushed to do direct sales and bundles. So they're going to be pushed to bundle and then compete with direct sales. Okay. And that includes even on the service side. And then customer perception, okay, is going to take a hit. All right. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the OEM stuff later. Okay. If you're using Kepware now, Kepware is really the big one here. We don't know what's going to happen with Prophecy. And my guess is ultimately ThingWorx is either going to find a niche in the market or it's going to go away altogether. If the market responds and there's a niche for ThingWorx, then it may survive. Okay. It's not likely. It's much more likely that, ThingWorx's best days are behind it. It's much more likely. Okay. So bottom line for the white label partners, the OEMs. In the short term, nothing's exploding. Everything keeps working, yada, yada. Okay. But over the next few years, you should expect that renegotiations, TPG's arm that's owning this, they're going to come back and they're going to renegotiate your OEM terms, and they're really not going to be in your favor, and it's going to feel a lot less like a partnership. Okay. Number two, there will be a lot of pressure to align with TPG's platform narrative. Right now, if you're a Kepware OEM partner, PTC never got involved in that shit. Never. I mean, Kepware has run autonomously for 2 years. TPG did not buy Kepware to run it so that it'll run autonomously as a business. Kepware is going to be wrapped into another business. Okay, there is a new brand we're going to hear about. Okay. Then there will be a slow but steady shift of power away from the resellers and towards the owner of the IP. Because when they go out, when they exit, when TPG exits, and they're going to, they don't hold anything long. They have a 6-year average hold. TPG is looking for an exit. Okay. And if you want to look at Boomi or New Relic or Thysotic or McAfee or any of their other previous acquisitions, same thing. And believe me, they only have, it's pretty difficult to make an argument that they even have a win in industrial software. They got a lot more losses than they do wins. They've got a couple they made some money on, but not because they did good for the customer. So partners are going to have to decide, do we stay tied to the Kepware engine at any cost? Or do we start building more vendor-neutral, UNS-friendly strategies so we're not fully exposed to one private equity-owned stack? Okay? The big picture for all of you, the question you have to answer is, who owns my data layer? For the industry, this deal is one more step in a very clear split. On the one side, you got private equity and publicly owned industrial platforms, tightly integrated, end-to-end, but gradually more closed and much more expensive. And by the way, there's no example of it going in a different direction in that space. Gradually more closed and more expensive. I just want to hit pause here. This is why what HiveMQ is doing, okay, what HiveMQ is doing with Pulse. This is why what TatSoft is doing with frameworks. This is why what WinCCOA is doing, or ETM is doing with WinCCOA. This is why even what Litmus is doing is so important. What MaintainX is doing. What Fuse is doing. Fuse is an answer to Boomi, being honest with you. And they're our sponsor this month. So my position, on the one side, you got and tightly coupled. On the other, you've got open UNS architectures, which we talk about all the time. By the way, Kepware is a huge part of that. But the real question is, how long will they be now? How long will you be able to leverage Kepware in open infrastructure? Because TPG didn't buy fucking Kepware. Kepware is the golden goose here. The sticky install base. That's what this acquisition is about. Make no mistake about it. So my position is simple. If you want freedom, flexibility, transparency in data infrastructure, then you're going to build UNS, and you're going to treat Kepware and any of your other edge platforms and everything else as replaceable components, nodes and ecosystems. The reason this video is important is because TPG is going to make it harder and harder and harder for you to do that with Kepware. Okay. And if you sit still and just trust the roadmap, you're eventually going to find yourself inside a very polished, very expensive walled garden. And the terms of that garden are set in a boardroom you're not invited to. Okay. And I want to encourage you to go and do your homework on TPG. Okay. This came from one of the analysts. So I asked for wins and losses. Okay. So in one of the reports that they emailed to me last night, it had one win, and it was Wind River. So they bought Wind River from Intel, and they sold it to Aptiv for $4.3 billion. And it was widely reported as a strong strategic transaction and positioned as an accelerator for software-defined automotive. Okay. But under the losses, it is a long-ass list. So he said, if you want to wrap this into a message for the video, this isn't some side fund. Kepware, ThingWorx, and Prophecy are going into TPG Capital, the same flagship buyout platform that bought Wind River from Intel and sold it to Aptiv for $4.3 billion, and that carved out Boomi and New Relic, and that helped spin McAfee out of Intel and drive it into a $14 billion take private. The job of that fund is not to babysit products. Its job is to buy control of platforms, grow revenue and margins, dress them up as next-gen leaders, and then sell them or IPO them. So when we talk about what happens to Kepware's pricing, OEM contracts, and roadmap, we're not guessing about personality. We're looking at a repeatable playbook TPG Capital has already run on other software and industrial assets. Yeah, I want to talk about PTC's failure here. And then if there's any questions, I'll answer them, and then I'm going to go through some more details. PTC's original investment, when they bought ThingWorx in 2013, that was $112 million, and there was like an $18 million bonus structure in there. And then they bought Kepware for $100 million in 2015. Okay, so the total original investment for ThingWorx and Kepware was $212 million. Okay, they did nothing. This is how valuable Kepware's install base was, and ThingWorx potential. Okay, they did nothing with either of those platforms. Nothing. Like the investment in those platforms was minimal. The improvement of those platforms was minimal. Their leadership in the market was minimal. And they sold 12 years later for $600 million. That is not a win. That is not a win at all. That is an admission of failure. Especially when you couple in the Rockwell deal. Okay. In 2018, Rockwell made a $1 billion equity investment in PTC, primarily for ThingWorx, to put ThingWorx in the innovation suite. The ThingWorx became Rockwell's Factory Talk Innovation Suite. That $1 billion investment was a play for ThingWorx. Okay. So if you take what Rockwell spent, what and what PTC spent on Kepware and ThingWorx, you've got $1.2 billion. Okay, $1.2 billion that was just sold for $600 million. Now, Rockwell still has their equity investment in ThingWorx, and they can realize value later on in selling stock, because they basically own 8% or whatever it is of PTC, and Blake Murray sits on the board and all that jazz. But this was a massive, massive failure on PTC's part. Massive. All right. So real quick, I just want to go through the details here, like just quickly go through this, and then I'll answer any questions you guys have. And then I'll do the call to action. So what TPG actually bought and why Kepware is the real asset. So Kepware's role in the real world is they're the de facto industrial gateway in thousands of plants, and they're sticky. Okay. And that should be a cause for concern for people, because that stickiness is what's going to be leveraged. Okay. ThingWorx's role is merely legitimacy. It's like, first off, they couldn't buy Kepware if they didn't also buy ThingWorx. You have to ask the question, why Prophecy, ThingWorx, and Kepware? Like, I'm a solutions architect. I've been doing digital transformation for 25 years. There is not a single architect on the fucking planet, not one, who's going to tell you Prophecy, ThingWorx, and Kepware together makes sense. Okay, at all. Especially since more and more over time, ThingWorx is designed to ingest from OSI Pi. The things objects, you know, the core of a ThingWorx is a thing called, it's called a thing. You can basically create classes, and those classes they basically pass up through the platform. It's kind of a brilliant way to design. The issue is that there was no abstraction layer from open infrastructure into the things, into the classes. Also, the classes are not extendable. They're not heterogeneous and homogeneous. You can extend a class definition and it will propagate to all the other classes, the thing, but you doing ad hoc additions, parameterized or ethereal parameters inside of a thing, that's not supported. The latter is definitely not supported. The former kind of a little bit. ThingWorx is primarily today designed to ingest from OSI Pi. Not that it can't ingest through other connectors, but the core of the platform is designed to consume from OSI Pi. Okay, so let me get this straight. The vision here, okay, because if you look at Prophecy, ThingWorx, Kepware, it's OPC. So is the idea that this new platform, this new the plumbing in the new platform is going to be OPC UA? And you're going to try and pitch that as, you mean to tell me that 10 years after Azure tried that and failed, you're going to try it now with $1.2 billion worth of software you just bought, where the real value is the install base of Kepware because it's sticky? But make no mistake about it, it is fucking hard to undo Connect Collect. Let's say you've got Kep Server EX sitting in your plant, okay? And you want to rip out Kep Server EX and you want to put something else in, okay? In this case, since Litmus is pitching it, Litmus's roadmap is like a 6 to 8 week roadmap. It's not fucking, you know, changing in an afternoon. You know, let's say I've got dashboards built in Grafana and I want to put them in Looker Studio Pro, okay? I can bolt both into the same infrastructure. I can pipe the data into BigQuery and Google Cloud, use Looker Studio Pro from Google Cloud Services for my dashboarding tool. And I get a lot more powerful, like, data analytics capabilities. To go from Grafana to Looker Studio Pro, the visualize, this is the conversion of data into decision. That is a very easy process. It's very easy to decouple. That is not a 6 to 8 week process. But Connect Collect, configure your drivers to talk to all your fucking devices. And then for all the devices that don't have self-discover, I go ahead and map all the data points and then put them in a semantic hierarchy and a tag hierarchy, and then take the clients and plug the client in. That is not easy. That's a lot of fucking work. There's a reason people don't rip Kepware out. TPG knows that. TPG's position is probably PTC wasn't leveraging that install base aggressively enough. Don't take my opinion for it. Don't take my word for it. Don't take anything I say here as gospel. Do your own homework. Okay? So what should you expect going forward? Okay? Stabilize, monetize, modernize. Okay. So TPG doesn't usually break products. What they do is they tighten the economics, they reshape the roadmap around their exit strategy. Their exit strategy is either going to be IPO or sale. Okay. In general, they're looking for 4, 5, 6x return. Okay. In general. So let's say they want a 4x return. That is a $2.4 billion sale that they'd be looking for 4 to 6 years from now. Okay. Just based on multipliers, they will have to grow the revenue significantly to achieve that. And you tell me, are they going to do that through growing the install base, or are they going to do that from squeezing the current install base? It's going to be a combination of both, but they're going to find out real quick that it's going to be a lot fucking harder for them to find new customers to sell to, because their pricing is going to be way out of whack. They're not using 1,000, 5,000, 50,000 enterprise tiers of pricing. When they go to monetize, they are going to cross-sell and bundle. So Kepware and Prophecy are going to kind of be bundled together. There's likely in a new platform. And then the ultimate play is going to be Kepware plus services plus cloud options, primarily probably AI enablement. And they'll focus on annual recurring revenue growth, attach rates, and contract values. That they're going to be looking at long-term deals. Take sticky, long-term. Nothing about that is how do we provide maximum value to our customers? It's going to be, how can we promise maximum value to increase contract value, attach rates, and ARR growth prior to exit? Because the nasty little secret in our industry is it takes 18 months at a minimum for the customer to realize they got ripped off. So what does it mean for different groups? Kepware end users I'm going to focus on. So short term, first 12 to 18 months, nothing. You know, you're going to get a couple of announcements. Everything's going to run great. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need to freak out. Okay. This is a strategic discussion. This is, okay, be aware of what this acquisition means. Okay. Okay. Here are some likely outcomes here. Okay. Kepware, ThingWorx, Prophecy are owned by someone who's not going to own it 5 years from now. And they're not interested in owning it 5 years from now. They're going to sell it to somebody else. And in that time, they've got to make it more valuable. Okay. And so that, and more valuable is on the P&L and the balance sheet. So they're going to be weighing, you know, every dollar they invest is going to be, okay, what's the immediate return we can get from that investment? So it's going to be a lot of like lipstick on a pig kind of stuff. Unless strategically they go, hey, listen, let's dump $2 billion into developing a new platform. And all we're really doing is using Prophecy, ThingWorx, and Kepware's install base to give them alternatives. We've already got all the people who are spending the money. We know how much money they're spending. We already are connected to the decision makers, the people who sign the contracts. That's what we bought from them. Let's give them an alternative. Let's build a new one, build a new platform that's an alternative. And then what's their churn rate going to be there? You know, hell, if they can get 50% to go to the alternative, that's probably a win. 70% churn's much more likely. So I don't think that's the direction they're going. I don't think building a brand new platform from scratch is the direction they're going. It's probably going to be a monkey patch. Medium term. So after 18 months, you should expect pricing and licensing adjustments. So the licenses you buy, the drivers you buy should look different. The technology should be similar, hopefully updated at some point, but the way you buy it should look different starting 18 months from now. You know, think less a la carte, more manufacturing suite. Okay. Roadmap will gravitate towards a tighter integration to Prophecy and any other assets. And strategically, the roadmap is going to gravitate towards features that support TPG's goals, not the end user's goals. Like TPG's not interested. They're not in the business of creating digital infrastructure for end users, manufacturers. So the risk profile, the main risk is slow, quiet loss of leverage for the end user. You're going to become more dependent on an integrated suite, and your switching costs are going to go up year after year. All right, OEM partners. So those who are working with Kepware, maybe they're white labeling. I've already gone over this. I'm just going to hit the bullet points. Commercial pressure is the big one. Okay. The existing OEM deals are going to be repriced, rebundled, or retermed. And you're going to be pushed to sell the full solution. Roadmap dependency. You're going to have less of a say. Channel conflict. You're going to more and more, you're going to be competing with TPGs. Okay. And then you'll have a strategic dilemma. I would say the people who are working with the OEMs have the least to worry about right now. Okay. And then the rest of us. So anyone who's building an Industry 4 stack on Kepware's connectivity. By the way, I use fucking Kepware. Well, since Litmus Edge came out, where I can deploy Edge via container, I have not installed Kepware. But up until that moment in August, when Kepware Edge came out, or Litmus Edge, in developer edition, 99% of the time it was Kepware. So you have an architectural impact for us. If your architecture assumes Kepware is forever, which by the way we do, you've just taken on a private equity risk at the core of the stack. And by the way, at the stickiest part of the stack. And make no mistake about it, TPG knows it. Your unified namespace, data lake, analytics layers, AI initiatives can all be indirectly controlled by Kepware roadmap decisions and TPG's platform bundle strategy, which is why your voice is going to be so important, which is one of my calls to action. Commercial impact. Total cost of ownership is going up. Make no mistake about it. Total cost of ownership is going up. It's not going down. The market, the market of scalability is not going to, as the market scales, costs should come down. We're going to see costs go up because TPG purchased based on a belief that they can squeeze more out of the existing install base because it's sticky. So base licenses plus maintenance going to go up. Optional add-ons that are going to become recommended and then required. So buying drivers a la carte, you'll see that go away. You're going to see more. We only offer the manufacturing suite, for example. You lose freedom to choose best of breed components. The philosophical impact. 2 clear paths. Closed, investor-owned industrial platforms with strong integration and strong lock-in, and open UNS-based architectures built on standards like MQTT, OPC UA, AMQP, with interoperable tooling. So things you should do right now, concrete steps you should take. So if you're a Kepware end user, okay, short-term due diligence, take an inventory. Where is Kepware running? What does it connect to? You need to take an internal inventory. Where is Kepware running? Where are all the instances? And what does it connect to? And what are all of our licenses we currently have? Like on paper, reference architecture, spreadsheet. You want to map all your dependencies. Okay, so you want to take which applications will break if Kepware changes. Like if we just unplugged Kepware, what are the implications? And it's not just Kepware to the direct client. It's also the client of the client to Kepware. You want to map those impacts. Okay. Number 3, you want to review your current contracts, terms, renewal dates, and maintenance clauses with Kepware. Strategic planning. So this is longer term. This is 12, 18 months out. Philosophically, you need to be thinking of Kepware as a component, okay, not a foundation. And then this holds true for everything. The reason we have to point this out here is because of the impacts of this acquisition. What does it mean? You are a fool. You are a fool if you believe that TPG bought Kepware, ThingWorx, and Prophecy to do nothing with them and to do nothing with the customers. TPG isn't in the business of spending 3 years building a brand new platform to sell to the customer base. So they are going to get more out of the existing customer base. And they're going to do it with as little investment as possible. The people who have been saying, what is the possible upsides of this deal? You know what I mean? And they're like, hey, yeah, private equity can invest money. Well, they can, except that's not TPG's track record. Their track record isn't transforming markets. It's squeezing more out of existing customer bases, shoring up light. It's mostly business decisions. It's plays on the market. It's making the balance sheet and the P&L look better for exit. That's what TPG does. And that's not my opinion. Just go look it up. So you're a fool if you believe that this isn't the main venture fund who's the primary investor in HighByte. The main venture fund is focused on improving industry and the quality of lives of all people who live in Maine. And HighByte happens to be based in Portland. So what you have is a higher level mission from that group who's investing in HighByte. There's not a higher level mission here. There is no higher level mission here. This is how can we get more out of the install base? That's what it is. That's what this is. It pains me to fucking say this. By the way, so many of you out there who do not have a vested interest, who do not have a financial interest in this working out with TPG, okay, agree with me. Number 2, design your UNS and data architecture so another gateway can be swapped in if needed. This is a strategic approach you got to take that you haven't been taking. And we're going to have to. This is where tools like HighByte come in. Start exploring alternative connectivity options as your plan B. And I'm not here to tell you to, obviously Litmus is the obvious alternative. Like if you look at connectivity, who's 1 and 2 in the market, it's Kepware Litmus. But there are other options. But if you ask what I'm using, it's Litmus. Even though I'm uncomfortable, I don't like, and I haven't talked to Vatzel directly about their going right after I think the optics look shitty. But their hearts are in the right place. And that matters. If you're an OEM partner, you need to do some commercial prep. Okay? You need to do some technical prep. And I've talked to a couple of the OEMs and they're looking at, they've got plans, And then communication. Here's the biggest role. And this is the reason I decided to not, to not allow the OEMs to talk me out of doing this. As an OEM, you have a very unique opportunity. If you look at most Kepware's customers, most of Kepware's customers are using Kepware through an OEM, someone who's white labeling. They're not most of Kepware's install base isn't direct Kepware. Okay. Otherwise, Kepware couldn't have grown as big as they did. Okay. The OEM partner, if you're an end user, is your biggest ally. If you're the end user, your OEM partner, the one who's white labeling Kepware, they are your biggest ally. And if you're the OEM partner, you are the voice of comm for the end user. You have privy to the tech. You see the skyline. You know where this is going. You can prepare your end users. This is why I didn't allow any of them to talk me out of this. And believe me, several tried. And then if you're designing or owning an Industry 4 UNS stack, reinforce open infrastructure on open architecture philosophically. Okay, you need to manage risk. So first and foremost, where do we rely on Kepware? Where do we depend on it? Because everywhere you depend on Kepware, you now depend on TPG's future decisions. And there is something that is fundamentally changed here this week. Okay, before we knew that PTC was selling Kepware, everyone believed they were in it for the long haul. And now the reality is Kepware and ThingWorx and Prophecy have all been bought by a private equity group who we know is not in it for the long haul. We know with absolute certainty they are not in it for the long haul. So that means you as a customer, you as an end user, you as an architect, you are a means to an end. And that end is making the P&L and the balance sheet look as good as possible for exit. That means not weathering any short-term downturns. So there's when their skyline is so short, we have to maximize exit 4 to 6 years from now. They're going to eat nothing. They're going to eat nothing. You are going to feel immense commercial pressure 12 to 18 months from now. You won't feel anything in the next 12 to 18 months. Build a migration playbook you hope you never use. So alternative, connect, collect strategy. Build a migration playbook. Number 3, mindset shift. So stop thinking, what does Kepware offer next? And the reason I'm harping on Kepware is the value here. Okay. I would be fucking stunned if they turn Prophecy into anything. I'd be less stunned if they turn ThingWorx into something. I just don't think TPG has the insight to see that ThingWorx has the least amount of technical debt. Imagine this, okay? If you took Kepware, HiByte, and ThingWorx, and you bolted all 3 of those together, okay? And you fix the technical debt in Kepware, you move to edge-based, Linux-based drivers that are container deployed. You can, use Kubernetes and DevOps tools to manage all your deployments. You have HiByte as your open data pipelines into open infrastructure. And you got ThingWorx for converting the data into the decision, the visualization layer. You got to invest in ThingWorx. You got to invest in a refactoring of Kepware, and you got to keep HiByte doing what it's doing. And by the way, I never said that publicly. I never said that was the perfect scenario, because that was the one I was hoping for. But stop thinking, what does Kepware offer next, and start thinking, how do I design my architecture so any gateway can be swapped in when it makes business sense? Last but not least, if you're an end user, if you're an OEM, and if you're an architect, you must make your voice heard, okay? You want to sit down and you want to ask yourself 3 questions. Number 1, what do I want this deal to look like? What's the perfect scenario 24 months from now? What does TPG create with these 3 assets? Write that down. What's the perfect scenario? Number 2, what is the likely scenario? What do I think they're actually going to do? What is the most likely outcome? Number 3, what is the delta between what I'd like to see them do and what I think they're going to do? That's number 3. And then you take that and you communicate to TPG the difference. Hey, you should go in this direction. Let me make something perfectly clear. The most valuable thing TPG bought was Kepware's install base. That means the most powerful people in this transaction are Kepware's install base. All right. Questions. Did anybody even watch this? Is there a lot of people on here, Josh? All right. Oh, wow. There are a lot of people. Holy crap. Josh, do you have any questions I should answer? There's a lot in here. Oh, wow. So is the takeaway for end users is to look to other software gateways or hardware gateways like Redline? It's a combination of both. Aaron, this is a good question. Okay. Here's the takeaway. Here for connectivity, where the ideal scenario is with connectivity, is that you orchestrate connect collect. So you orchestrate connect collect through DevOps pipelines. So rather than going into, say, Kep server EX and going into the configuration front end, we use basically text files to construct the instruction for how those connections should be established. And then they are deployed through containers, where we're wrapping a container and we're deploying the connection to a container running on a device. And that connection is consuming a config file. Okay, this is one of the big announcements that Inductive Automation did with 8.3. This is called orchestrated environments, orchestrated composable DevOps. That's the direction you really want to be going. This is why Litmus coming out with Developer Edition, which is a containerized deployment, is so important, because it's the first step in that composable connectivity architecture. Where would I look? I would look at in order, I would look at, well, I wouldn't make any changes yet. Oh, this is about you being aware about where to go. Because the perfect scenario is that the market pressures TPG to keep Kepware decoupled from this new platform. Okay, so basically keep Kepware, the connectivity connect collect, decoupled, which they're not going to do, but you can pressure them to do it. Okay, I don't think anyone, you should see who TPG actually is. Okay, the perfect scenario is that it's decoupled. And then what they do is they white label their own decoupled connect collect layer into their IoT platform, which would be built on either Prophecy or ThingWorx. I mean, the reality is, the irony here is that ThingWorx is in the position it's in, not because it's a bad platform, but because PTC sucked at managing ThingWorx. PTC spent so much, they were trying to get as much money out of it as they could. So they didn't invest anything in it. But the irony here is that if you wanted to take, by the way, Autosol was number 2, coming up next, Dustin. If you wanted to build a new platform from these 3 assets, I'd start with ThingWorx. Because ThingWorx has the least amount of technical debt. ThingWorx's issue is only that it's been neglected. It's not that it's built poorly. Like, you have to make some structural changes, like the way that they built, the way the thing object is handled in the back end. It needs to be more easily extensible in an ad hoc way. So it needs to be able to support ethereal parameters and stuff like that. That's agreed right there. What Rick just said, as Walker pointed out, these platforms have been underinvested for years. The smart move would be to pump some money in, not suck more out. Agreed. 1000%. You got to refactor Kepware. You got to reinvest in the Litmus drivers and get into composable container-based deployment. Prophecy is the harder one, because it was literally built as a monolith. ThingWorx was not built as a monolith. It transitioned to a monolith based on strategic partnerships. Like, basically what they supported, connectors that they supported, were a function of partnerships. They didn't just take the SDK, put it out to the world, and say, create an ecosystem, which they could have, because that's how it's built. They just didn't, because they were trying to funnel you Like they didn't want you necessarily using Canary Labs Historian. They wanted to funnel you to OSI Pi. All right, Soccer Sluice. I struggle with the actual value of Kep server at all in the future. Almost every platform employs their own connect collect layer with more and more focus on an open architecture. Agreed. The problem here is that how do you handle connect collect at scale? That's the issue. The issue is I use like Ignition, for example. If you take Ignition's drivers, their device drivers, and you compare their device drivers to Kepware's device drivers, okay? There is no comparison. It's a night and day compare. Even if you compare Autosol, someone mentioned Autosol here. So if that's called ACM, Autosol Communication Manager. It's very popular in oil and gas. However, Autosol is looking at pivoting the platform, basically all of industry, right? The most performant of the three is Autosol. Autosol handles more data throughput. It had to because it was oil and gas. But Autosol handles more throughput than even Kepware does. And then if Kepware is our last benchmarking was like 6x. I could make one Kep server EX 6 times the throughput of any Ignition gateway. And one of the problems you have, say, with Ignition is that it's one Java virtual machine that is running all gateway resources. Now, obviously, they're pivoting away from that with the new 8.3 release. There's even less value in rip and replace. Private equity ownership and open standards are not mutually exclusive options. From a philosophical, Silver Agnes, from a philosophical perspective, I agree with you 1,000%. However, Josh, bring that back up again real quick. But open standards oftentimes are in direct opposition to what it is private equity is trying to achieve, which is to squeeze more out of the current customer base. And open gives customers options, and private equity oftentimes is looking to funnel them to an option. Yes, Dylan Dufresne. This is important. I want to go back to the driver thing, the connect collect question. I like to call Ignition's drivers the starter drivers, and we're going to use Ignition as the. I call them the starter drivers. They're a great place to, a lot of times people will land Ignition and they do everything in Ignition. And then eventually they hit critical mass when they're trying to scale across a whole business. And they're like, okay, well, maybe I should have done the distributed architecture to begin with. So then they kind of undo things and they decouple and they go, you know what? We're no longer going to use Ignition's drivers. What we're going to do is we're going to use Kepware because Kepware has higher throughput. We can offload the workload. Right now, Ignition offers that in distributed architecture as well. But if you're going to like enterprise class connectivity and you're going to be going to millions and millions and millions of data points, okay, and you're going to be doing hundreds of millions of messages per hour, you're not doing that in Ignition. I mean, as much as I love the platform, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you can achieve that in Ignition. You cannot. You'd have to spend hundreds of thousands in licensing to do that. You could do a distributed architecture and make it work, but I don't think even inductive automation would tell you to do that. I think inductive automation would tell you to offload connect collect at that point. Okay. Carlos, was this the end of the Rockwell partnership with PTC? And what do you think is going to be Rockwell's next move? This is a really so Blake Murray, who is he's the CEO at Rockwell. He went to Georgia Tech. He's a Georgia Tech engineer. I think he was mechanical. And I just spoke at Georgia Tech Friday at their manufacturing institute. And one of the things that stood out to me was that the IoT symposium, no one talked about Rockwell at all there. At all. And that really stood out to me. I think Rockwell's long-term strategic plan should be to divest the businesses that they're just not very good at. Go ahead, Josh. Throw me are there any upsides except for maybe the PE? Any upsides to the acquisition, Vlad? Okay, good question. Yes. There are many upsides. Okay. But they're potential upsides. Like what I'm pointing out here is this is kind of if you think about what we're doing here, the goal of it is to inform the market, based on my opinions. Like, again, these are my opinions. Do your own homework, please. And inform you on the likely outcomes, and then do a call to action. Here's the upside, Vlad. TPG's got an enormous amount of capital, and they are connected to a lot of private investors where they can raise capital. PTC was not in a position to continue to invest in Kepware or ThingWorx. And so it sort of became like this snowball. Once they didn't invest and they were getting further and further behind, the amount of money they'd have to invest in became money that they couldn't afford to put in. Private equity has that money. Okay. And there is a massive opportunity here for private equity that has vision, right? This deal could be the underpinnings of a groundbreaking new platform. I hate to say this. You know what they ought to do? Let's assume the upside is real. That is, they're going to invest. Okay. And by the way, even Bellata invests all the time. Rick knows, I think Rick would tell you the same thing, which is the upside is they could put money in and they could develop a product that has been drastically missing in the market. Okay. But how likely is it that they're going to do that? Right. He just said it's hard to envision it though. How likely is it that private equity, that they're going to do that based on TPG's track record? So the upside is that there's potential. There's potential for real investment. You want to know what I would do? If it was my choice here, okay? I'd buy HiByte, and I'd take ThingWorx, HiByte, and Kepware together, and I refactor Kepware to go composable, container-based architecture. Okay, I would put HiByte in the middle as a data ops layer because there's just no one better. I mean, Pulse looks like is gonna really compete with HiByte on the MQTT stuff. HiByte does a lot more than MQTT, and then ThingWorx is on the top. ThingWorx had so much potential. It's crazy. So much potential. Oh, I like that. Ignition, HiByte, and Fuse. To be honest, Kepware feels like old technology. You could build something great from it, but I can't see it. Yes, you could. No question mark. It is how it is realized is old. Yeah, I mean, it's Windows based. I'm not saying that Nirix, all funded by private equity, is this a make-believe stream? No, I'm not saying I think that this is what's going to happen. Someone asked me, what's the upside? HiByte and Litmus are the front runners? Yes, they are. And Ignition is not for sale. You guys want to know something? Here, I'll tell you something that I wasn't going to say. Do you want to know why TPG did this deal? Because they couldn't buy Ignition. Because Ignition's not for sale. Not that they didn't try. Or another very large private equity firm out of Charlotte. Yes, private equity can do good. They just rarely do. This is why values matter. Any other... Man, there's a lot of comments in there. Crap. Kepware Plus was a bust. If it was more user-friendly and added capability, it would have been a game changer for those who deployed multiple instances. I was very disappointed. Yes, Kepware Plus Here's the fundamental issue. Okay. Here's a if we just talk about just Kepware, okay? Kepware has lost all their talent. Not all that there are good people there, okay? And at least Abby, who runs the show over there, her head, her heart, and her specific strategies are in the right place. The problem is that the people that she's come to rely on are not there anymore. You know what I mean? It's like if you've lost all the people. Rick, thank you, buddy. Thanks for getting the conversation going. Your point of view is very important, Seifel. What are they going to do? Like, how is Kepware going to turn it around? TPG doesn't have the people, but the community has the ability to guide them. And the most important people here, the people with the most influence, are Kepware's install base. All right, with that, I'm going to go through all the chat because I had the chat closed while I was reading. That way I didn't get distracted. There's a lot of stuff in here. Holy crap. I have a question to get in front of you next time several people ask. Okay. I will have more on the topic. Okay. What I will say is there is cause for optimism. Just be aware of what the downsides are and make sure you have a plan. Okay. Start taking a look at, the 3 action items I gave you earlier. Inventory where Kepware is being used. If you're already using ThingWorx, you're making a move. Yeah, I mean, everybody who's using ThingWorx is already pivoting. I'm telling you that. But have a plan for decoupling Kepware if you have to. Do you have some info about Kepware Edge? Yes, they're developing the Linux-based drivers, the containerized drivers. I have not received an update on the status of those drivers. I was part of the beta in the original development maybe 5 years ago, and they were having that. You have to understand that the software developers at Kepware, their expertise is in languages A, B, and C, and they're developing the Linux-based drivers in different language. They basically have to have a completely different product team to develop those drivers. The good news is that Kepware has the person who was in charge of product is no longer in charge of product. And that person had been in charge for a very long time. Does Prophecy have any future? What are good products with Prophecy? Prophecy in its current form has no future. Jacob Clodfelter. I just don't see a world where a Kepware, ThingWorx, Prophecy, TPG monolith is the partner stack that I would want. Is it isn't or is? I think Jacob means he wouldn't want that. I mean, me either. I don't know why. Yeah. I think here's the issue. I think TPG is looking at they're looking at Palantir, and they're thinking we can be Palantir on the open market. So what Palantir is to aerospace and defense, they can build a monolith that's going to work in discrete manufacturing, food and bev, life sciences. And it just demonstrates that they don't understand how manufacturing facilities are built. The fact that all these programs are written by completely different people, oftentimes with no standards whatsoever, give the same functional spec and sequence of operations to 10 different PLC programmers. You're going to get 10 completely different programs with 10 completely different naming standards that all do the exact same thing. And oftentimes inside of a plant, you see that across assets. I have 5 production lines do exactly the same thing, and I've got 3 different programs. And so the integration cost to unlock the data in each of those assets is 3x, not 1x. All right. With that, thank you guys for watching. Sorry that we did it at short, on a short notice, but I'll actually be back on here in 90 minutes. We're doing a podcast with Maintenance at noon. But thank you guys for joining us. Please use your voices with TPG. Like, subscribe, comment down below.